Welcome everyone to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me as always. I am very excited to have this next conversation and to share it with all of you. On the show today is Abby Wiseman. She is a content creator and writer in the food industry. She is a multi-talented woman who just, I've known you since you were little, and to see how much you've grown in who you are, your spiritual journey too, because I've been lucky enough to kind of walk beside you on some of that. It's so cool to see how it's expressed in your work. And so, the photographs that you do, the words you use, the way you create is such a reflection of you. It's just amazing. So anyways, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Nice to be here. I was saying to Ginette before I came on that I'm so used to being the one asking the questions. So I'm like very weirdly nervous about, having to actually talk for myself,
Right? To turn it around and be vulnerable.
Yeah. Relinquishing control right now.
Yes. Good for you. Everyone should do that every once in a while, I think. So this whole topic came up because you sent me a message one day of this critical moment of thought. Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to share?
Yeah. I just randomly send you questions.
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry to take up your time, but I'm wondering about this. I think this happens. I don't know if it actually, I've checked it with some friends and it doesn't actually happen to everybody, but I was lying in bed the other night and I just got hit with that idea of you're going to die one day.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not going to be here. And it's like that full body kind of like anxiety wrench. And then I felt it in my toes and it's like, oh my God, like I'm going to die. Like I won't be here. I won't be seeing this room. I won't be in this place. And it sort of was like, whoa. And then, like 5 minutes later, I'm like, well, there's nothing I can do about it. So like, and then the next day I was like, what is that? Like, what is that, spirit taking you in the pants? Is that, some sort of subconscious crisis or something like that? Like what is happening there? So I left that to you.
Well, it's such a great question because I think many of us do confront that in some way. And you're right, not every single person does, but I personally think a lot of people do at some point. And it depends on what they do with it, right? Like I think it surfaces for people and then it's their choice how deeply they choose to look into it. And so what often happens is people will have that thought come up and it'll either terrify them, so they'll block it out and do everything possible to avoid that question. Or others will take it as a doorway into a deeper journey of self and what it really means and what is actually death and what happens after death. And it can take people on this really interesting journey of discovery. So it's kind of like a marker that comes up and we get to choose what we do about it. And so I think it's a beautiful thing to talk about because for many people, that is a scary moment of like, oh my God, I am going to die. I could die tonight. I could die this afternoon. I could die when I'm 95. Holy smokes. But either way, I am going to die.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's only been like, I don't know, like 5-6 days or whatever. But I've been really like, I don't know. I feel like it was a bit of a kick in the pants maybe for me because it's like, what do you want to do? Like, what's this? Why, like, do you want to spend more time scrolling on your phone of your life? Like the minute counts. And, you see a lot, especially I work in social media a lot. So you see a lot of like, make every minute count. Like, this is your life, romanticize your, all this kind of, whatever stuff. And I've sort of gotten really used to, I think, to inundation of that media. I've kind of like become silent to those messages or just like I don't see them anymore. What's the word? Desensitized to those messages because they just don't really mean anything. But like kind of getting that, I was like, oh God, it does mean something and it does matter. It's not just clickbait. And so yeah.
So question for you. So when that fear point came up in that response to it, when you're like, oh, was it a fear of the actual act of dying? Or was it a fear of leaving this incarnation and not knowing what's next?
It was more just like, I would say neither, actually. Like, I don't
Hmm.
really know. Yeah, it was more just like, I'm not going to experience, I guess maybe it is leaving this in this carnation, like the flower.
Incarnation. Yeah.
It's more like the sort of like, wow, like, oh my God, like I'm not going to feel a bed underneath me. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to feel, it's the
Hmm.
experiential part of being alive.
Yeah.
Something I'm not going to feel. And like, as far as what happens to me afterwards or, whatever, like, I don't remember what happened to me before, you know,
Hmm.
in the soul paces, I don't know what's going to, I was decided I want to come back as a whale this week, actually.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Okay. Yep.
like, I just really like the ocean and I want to explore it, but I want to be like big.
Yeah.
Um, and, um, yeah, I don't know. It sort of was more just like, whoa, like all these things, all these experiences that maybe sometimes I'm not experiencing because I'm distracting myself.
Hmm.
I'm not going to experience them.
Hmm.
And like, again, I don't know. I don't know if I'll experience it as a whale or not. But like,
Hmm.
that's it's a freaky thought, but it's also just a like, okay, like do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And I think too that like when these questions come up, it's such an interesting journey if we're willing to take it to
mhm.
see what can be unraveled in it. Because it could be very, very deep where we have to confront actual fears of death, like we're terrified of the act of death. But it can be that trigger into enjoying life more.
Yeah.
And you're not having to have a significant illness in this moment to notice that. Whereas a lot of people, it takes like an illness or an injury for them to be like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my life scrolling. And I'm not saying you scroll and waste your life, but that we stick with that statement. Like, oftentimes it takes people a really big life-changing event that is really scary to shock them into the reality that although our soul doesn't die, this lifetime is but for a time that will come to an end. And so what are you doing with it? So the fact, I think, for you that it was so it kind of shook you a little bit,
Hmm.
I think is such a beautiful thing because your soul is like, hey, we don't want to bring this in the form of like an illness or an injury, but you're at this point where you're a massive creator. What is it you really want to do? Is this
Yeah.
what you want to do? So what do you think? And I feel like you responded to that by
Yeah.
actually pondering.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sort of, it's an interesting thing because I've sort of been in a place of trying to figure out my next steps. I think for a lot of people, and myself included, like I'm gifted with some talents and I'm really like,
Mm-hmm.
but I also work on them. It's not like, oh, I just woke up one day and figured out how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But like, but at the same time, there's realities behind, say the work you do and what that means to you. And there is like, is it something you can do forever? Is it something that you want to do forever? And so I've kind of been, I think a lot of people in that place right now because they've had to look at themselves so much the
Mm-hmm.
last few years. So I've kind of just been opening myself up to new ideas, but that's hard. I mean, it isn't an easy thing to just, be like, I'm going to change my whole life and then go do it tomorrow. Like, it just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work like that. It does take some like courage to do it. And so it was funny getting that kind of hit of, mortality in a
Mm-hmm.
way. It was sort of like, okay, right, like this isn't, um, like don't think too long on these things, just go and do them and it'll be fine one way or the other because it's always fine, and
Mm-hmm.
I can say that from kind of a privileged position of being in Canada and, of a certain social status and all those things. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like everyone's just fine if they want it to be. That's not the social reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it felt like the computer turning on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
So, question for you. So, if we look at this thought of like, I'm going to die,
Mhm.
bringing you to a position of recognizing the choices that you can make that are
Yeah.
yours, right? Conscious choice. How would you consider living your life differently now? Like what has this inspired even in your thoughts and maybe not in actions? Because oftentimes, we get to these pivotal life moments and we think everything in our life has to change, but that's overwhelming and it's hard to make happen. So sometimes we have to start with like small things. Like in pondering this the last couple of days, what have you noticed is kind of showing itself that wants to be different, or maybe like letting down or letting go of a narrative you used to have or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been a little bit my mind lately. And I think I have been stuck in a narrative for several years, a little bit. Um, One, it's like I really enjoy simple things. Like to me, it's like I really enjoy cooking and eating the nice dish. And I really enjoy like I love this time of year because I just get like you would think I was like stoned the whole time. So I just walk around and like stare at flowers. And I just like I'm not, I mean,
Yeah.
not always, but like, you
Yeah.
know, it's like I just really I'm like, oh, and like just to be like, wow, those are so beautiful, and like they really are. And I think that's the thing. It's like I'm kind of like, yeah, like enjoy this because you're not going to be able to see them,
Mm-hmm.
and at least with these eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah.
enjoy those. But also as far as like those bigger narratives, and we'll see how this pans out. Um, but I have been trying to let go of some old things in the past, and I've been trying to let go of a little bit the story I've told myself, and maybe the story I've been told of myself, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm not really obligated to anybody, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
that sort of I've definitely felt like somebody I'm not the only one in my life who's like I'm kind of here to make sure all the holes are filled for other people in a way. Like it's kind of always felt like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait a second, like I'm the main character here. Like I'm not I'm not the sidekick in
Mm-hmm.
the film.
Yeah.
So that I'm like, okay, and it's like, what am I good at? What do I, what do I want to bring? And I think that's, you know, but also like kind of I think because I'm a person who does multiple things, like I have a little bit of shame around that because it's not like, I admire people who are like, this is my schooling, and then I went into this track, and then I did all these things.
Oh, yeah. That
I,
old template, though. That's an old template.
it is, but they generally are like, own a home and have like at least a bank account or something like that. When
Mm-hmm.
I'm like always trying something new, I'm always having to like, because I just enjoy learning and I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
creating.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt like a little bit of like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even though I know that other people don't see me like that at all.
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
know
I'm,
what? Sorry, I
yeah,
was going to say just on that point here, real quick, is what's interesting on a soul level is people that usually are continually jumping to new things to try something new. It's actually in their soul design, in their soul blueprint, that they literally walked in with this like huge list and they're like, I want to do all these things in my lifetime. And their
yeah,
guides, they're like, okay, it's going to be a lot. And they're like, yeah, but if I'm going to go in, I'm going to get a lot done. I don't want to just go in and do one thing. I want to do it all because I'm going to make the most of it. Let's make this effective. Let's go. And so then I noticed that when we learn that in people's blueprints, it reflects so much in their lifetime. And there is shame and guilt around it
yeah,
until they can realize, like, wait a minute, I designed to be this way.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not made for then I mean, and I admire I honestly wish I was in some ways because it's a lot easier the kind of 9 to 5
Easier. Yeah.
whatever, having to always kind of like daily I'm reinventing myself, and that's hard. That can be really
Mm-hmm.
hard times, or like confusing to general society. So um that makes sense. Yeah, I do feel that way, and I kind of feel a little bit less shame about that. It's like I'm going to live many lifetimes in this lifetime, and like so
Totally.
if I try, I'm going to go to school in September. I don't know what that's going to turn into, but I just know I need to build,
Mm-hmm.
and then to do something and open my world up again
Mm-hmm.
to something new. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see how it turns out. I might just like crawl under my covers again, but
But
yeah,
here's a thing that sometimes I think of too is I know sometimes when I'm on a precipice of like changing things in my life or going back to school, like that's a big decision, right? It's a big financial piece and time piece. And anytime that I'm at one of those decision points, I often will picture myself on my deathbed in the most traditional way, like an old lady, say 98 on my deathbed. Will I look back on my life and be happy with what I
mhm,
did, or will I look back on it like I wasted time?
yeah,
And every time I have that perspective, it almost gives me gratitude for whatever I'm in right now, or the decision point, or even if it's a tough lesson where I'm like, why me? I
Yeah.
can look from that perspective and be like, no, this is massive learning and growth. And I would not want the movie of my life to be boring. Would
Yeah.
want it to be interesting.
Yeah. And I would say it's like, I would say at this point in my life, I'm a little bit 50-50 on that. I've done some incredible things. I've met some incredible people. I've learned some really hard and really incredible lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I get to continue doing that, but it doesn't, I still feel like there's things I could have done or should have done better, and maybe that's the perfectionist kind of streak in me. But then I have to be kind of compassionate because it's like I was doing those things and that person in that time. And there are a lot of things I didn't know, So I don't maybe it's age or wisdom. It's like I don't judge my younger self as harsh as I once did, and I think that's in some ways that sort of existential crisis feeling where you're like, oh, I'm gonna die. It kind of washes some of that old stuff away a little bit because it's like, okay, well then I'm just going to keep trying things and half of them I'm going to fail at. Like, because it doesn't really, it's not that it I don't know if like doesn't really matter is the right, like it does matter. Your actions have a ripple effect, right? And it's like, and yeah, if you don't have good people around you or all those things, that does have a massive impact. Trying things and failing at them while being a kind, good person, it doesn't really matter. Like, it may change history. The future, probably not. But you may be able to like bring something or inspire somebody else and, show somebody else a different way of living. And I think that's like, kind of been a little bit as my cousin says, you kind of dance by the beat of your own drum. And and that's okay, so
that's absolutely okay. In fact, I really support and celebrate that in people and in myself, because so much of what we're really doing here, in my perspective anyways, is to find that drum beat, our specific drum beat or our soul song or whatever that may be. Like, it's important we know who we are and what we're about in order to create the reality or the experience within the reality that we want. And I think people that miss that are missing out on so much more depth of what life can be like. And I know that's a very generalized statement.
Yeah.
And I mean it in a generalized sense too, right? But I love that, and I celebrate that you feel that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, ask me in an hour and I'll be like, oh God, I know.
Right. Totally. Just live in the moment right now where it feels right. You're like, yes, yes. That's so funny. So I had another little thought of how you said that part of the triggering, we'll call it a trigger, but was, I'm not going to see the world through these eyes again. And I want to say something that I'm not sure if I know how to express it, but I'm going to wing it here because I really like that you said that. And I can share my experience of that in terms of my near-death experience. Is even though I personally know that there's stuff on the other side, I've been there and I came back, right? So for me, it's a no question, no brainer. But there will still be a little piece of me that will long for this lifetime once I'm there. Not longing, maybe that's not the right word, but what that feeling does is it helps me in even the tough moments on this planet right now to appreciate all the things through these eyes. Because when I was on the other side and I got a chance to kind of connect with my higher self and see my higher self as me looking at me, like it was as if it was another body that looked like me, but I knew it was my higher self. And then when I got to see myself from my higher self's perspective, I saw how much I loved this human life. And that helped me appreciate so much like you said, the flowers on this planet at any given time, the plants, the trees, the hugs from people, the foods, the way we taste them here, the very human things. It made me super appreciate that. And that is very unique to this place and this time and this lifetime. And so I like that was a clear kind of trigger or realization or notable point for you, because it is very valid. We are here for only a certain amount of time. And so it's so valuable to know that, I think. so that you can be more appreciative in all the moments of being human.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I would say, I feel like I'm talking about myself right now a lot, but I usually do.
That's okay. Totally okay.
Because I have questions for you too, Ginette, but but not yet. And I think like, again, like it's not like, oh, I just had this like feeling and something had changed. Like I think last time we talked, I was like, I need to like reparent myself and kind of go through this, like, who am I as this adult? Like I've kind of made it through this difficult time. I've kind of made it through this. And I think during the pandemic, you talked a lot about that waterfall, like jumping over the waterfall. And I don't know if I'm one of the jumpers. I may or may not
sure you are.
Yeah. And for anybody who's listening, who doesn't know, you can listen back. And I found Ginette's words really comforting during that time. Is that a cattail? It is.
Yes, it's my cat.
Yes. Like, what am I looking at?
I know.
I found that really comforting at the time. And she was talking a lot about how a lot of people are making these big shifts in themselves. And it's like people are jumping over this waterfall. And not everyone is, but a lot of people are. And that resonated with me. But I think, I've kind of been on this journey of like, being a mom to my, inner child, I think in some ways. And that's in just like habits, like, do I go to the gym in the morning? Do I go to bed at time? Like sometimes I actually go to bed on time. Like, how am I eating? How am I doing all these things? So I think it's like, I don't think these realizations just happen when you're like, watching the 5th episode of some Netflix show. Like, I think you have to put in some sort of effort and be like, I'm gonna like kind of figure this out. And it kind of seems crazy from the outside from people are like watching you try, and it seems like you're always trying to be something or do something. But I don't think they just come to you when you're sitting still. I think you have to like make an effort.
Yeah.
In some ways, I guess you always talk about co-creation, so that's probably
yeah, it's beautiful. I agree totally. We have to be an active participant in it, otherwise it passes us by and then we're on our deathbed and we're like, missed the boat. Or we're on the other side creating a new blueprint and we realize like, oh, you know what, I went into that lifetime and I didn't do this and this, and all right, let's try it again.
Yeah, I mean, daily I'm like, can someone just tell me what I'm supposed to be doing here? Like, I'm like, I think I did ask you about that. It's like, is there a way for me to know without having to like have a near-death experience? Because that scares me a lot. And like, I think death is kind of scary. I think it's equal parts scary and equal parts not scary, because it's like, by the time I die, I'm probably not going to know, like, unless, you're unfortunate enough to be very cognizant and maybe that's a beautiful thing to be very cognizant when you do go. I know my grandpa his heart just failed, but everything else was good. But most people I know really weren't there, but yeah, I mean, I'm scared of course of dying in some horrific way or painful way. Like that's not great. We'd rather not that.
Yeah, maybe not that one, please.
Yeah, please not, or some way that's not in my control. I think that's scary. But no, I don't necessarily look at death as like good or bad. It's just a thing, So, but it's a real thing,
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and it's one that we can't get away from.
No,
right? It's not. It's we can't avoid it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've wondered with you, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, ask away. Let's turn the tables now.
Right? I'm sorry, I've relinquished control enough. So for people who don't know, I have a journalism background and I've worked in radio and I still write magazines and stuff like that. So yeah, this is
natural.
This is my default. Like and I know I have your book and I've never read it and I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry, it'll be there when you're ready.
Read it, but I want to read the other 20 books beside my bed right now too. Yeah, so
that's okay.
When you, after your death experience, like when you came back, did you feel like a different person?
Well, so yes, to be very simple, yes, but I still felt like me, but I felt like an expanded version of me. And although in the beginning, I was just like, oh my gosh, this planet is amazing. And like blankets, they feel amazing. And physicality is amazing. And coffee, wow. Like everything was amplified.
Yeah.
There then was about a year for me to really kind of like reintegrate back into it. And in that year, there was like highs and lows of just consciousness, because then there was also the like crashing into the reality of how dense 3D is. And I don't mean dense as in like stupid or dumb, not that, but I mean like density of in polarity, darkness, hard things. I learned how much that earth life is a challenging place to be, because we have deep emotions, we have deep polarity, we have like all kinds of things, but it's with purpose. And so then, you know, I would be pondering sometimes like, God, why did I come back?
Yeah.
Like obviously my family and kids, so that would always keep me here. But there's a part of me that was like, why would I come back? We just went into a pandemic. Now we're totally locked down. Now I'm homeschooling my kids. Not like what? But even then in that, after I'd run that circuit, I would always come back to valuing again from the lens of my higher self, how much, like how important this life is. And these moments are important. And so to try and nutshell what I'm getting at is I did feel very different coming back. I felt like a greater expanded part of me that didn't necessarily fit with 3D humanity anymore. And I couldn't ignore it because it was changing already. But after my near-death experience, I couldn't ignore it. So I essentially had to really learn how to listen to the beat of my own drum and what that is. Yeah.
It sounds like kind of like reverse culture shock.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Culture shock's a great comparison. Very
like,
much so.
Yeah. And even like I, 10 years ago, I lived in Ghana for like, I don't know, 8 months or something like that. And I remember I wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, this is going to change my life. Like it just was an opportunity that came up. I wasn't like, I'm going to Africa, and I'm going to save all the children. Like that was not it. I was just, oh, cool, this happened. And then I went and I had this amazing experience. And in some ways I was like, no, I'm not going to be one of those girls. It's not going to change, because a lot of like people with, great intentions, but are also a little bit naive about things that are there. And, but over, when I came back, it was a shock, and I can look back now and see how much it changed me, and actually how much I see the world differently. And I see that with like old friends and family members, where it's like, wow, at what point did we diverge so much? And not in an unloving way, but we're just, different people and see the world really differently. And I think like I can imagine that experience would be kind of the same thing, but it's not like you wake up and you're like, I'm just going to do all these things. Like it kind of a slow integration.
It is. It's totally an integration. And that's one thing I learned though from that experience, which we can absolutely get when we travel or we do something big somewhere else, somewhere different. We give ourselves that opportunity to discover who we are in a more deeper way. So it's common to come back and not quite fit. Now, I used to think at first, like, oh, shoot, I don't fit. Like something's wrong with me. I did wrong or something. But what I realized is like, it's not about not fitting because something is wrong. It's just frequencies are different. And when our frequency changes or our vibration changes, we harmonize with other people at different frequencies. And when they're not in a harmonic frequency, they are disharmonic. It doesn't mean they're bad. They just don't merge. It's like trying to push magnets together that don't connect. It repels it. And I think there's something to be said for those moments, because we all move through ascension, or just let's call it personal growth, at different rates. So I think if we can hold a container for different rates of change for people, we're more okay in those ebbs and flows of when you're closer to family or friends, and then when it changes, and then maybe it comes back around. And like that is actually a normal progression of life. We just try to, with old narratives, hold on to what it should be of this linear parallel process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. 100%. I think I've experienced that myself when it's like, oh, I don't know, frequency change, or just like I just feel different than I did before, and like suddenly that person who was really close to me, just I can't really be around as much, and like it always makes me feel a bit narcissistic, to be honest, but like I think it also is just sort of then I'm like, I didn't sign a contract that I would be the same person for the rest of my life. And neither do I want you to sign that contract, you know? So yeah, I know it's an interesting thing, but I do think about that, you know, with your experience and, you know, and kind of what you've been doing the last couple of years, which has been like awesome. I'm really like, as somebody who does content, I'm actually impressed at how consistent you are.
Oh, thank you.
With all things. So like you must be very guided and driven by this, because like it's a lot. Like people don't know how much it takes to just load up a video on YouTube. Like it's not it's a lot of time, details, and lots of little finicky things that go wrong all the time. So it's impressive, you know. So
well, thanks. That's nice. I do definitely have a ton of guided information. So I think if I had to just pull or only create from my own energy, it would be very different. I mean, I kind of get an easier route, I think, in regards of having downloads. Like I tune in, I'm like, what's up? And then they share stuff and then I share it. So I think I have a bonus team in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I've done some things and like couldn't keep them up because I just couldn't keep the energy up for it. So it's impressive to see that you can, you know.
Oh, so. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's so nice. But you've been helpful in that too, though. You've given me tons of tips along the way. So
I have, yeah. But I think the student has become the master.
Ooh, I like that. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's true.
So what other you said you had other questions? Do you remember if you have any other ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about I was talking a bit about reparenting and sort of the habits and stuff like that that kind of lead me to having let me actually use my words that are leading me to kind of have these new realizations after your near-death experience. You know, were there habits that you just suddenly weren't aligned with anymore, or things that you just kind of gave up or just didn't, you know, feel you need in your life anymore? And maybe you've talked about this, and I'm sorry if you have. But you know, did you have to reparent yourself in this new energy?
I did. I definitely did. One of the things that surprised me that I had to reparent myself with, which took a good probably year and a half, was to no longer identify as the sick person.
Yeah.
Because leading up to that, I was always the one who's super anemic. I'm the one that can't do that hike. I can't do this. I'm always cold because I'm anemic. Like it was like, hi, my name is Ginette and I'm anemic, right? Like I have no blood volume, so I can't breathe very well and I'm cold and tired. So I'm gonna have a nap. Bye. Like I didn't realize how much I identified with that versus it was something I experienced, but I like embodied it. And so it took me a while to realize that that was no longer me. And I had to use a lot of conscious thought to reparent myself into like, no, you're not the sick one anymore. No, if you're cold, it's not because you're anemic. If you're tired, it's not like, so there was things like that I definitely had to work to also embrace the idea of this new canvas, that like I was done with the old canvas. And so kind of like you were saying, like embrace who I was now, not what I was before, and then embrace the lessons of who I was before. Not that that was bad, but just being that I felt so different, it was okay to feel different and be different. And it was okay also to love and honor what I was.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It totally. Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, it's funny you said like it took like 18 months, because I always find that everything for me happens in 18-month periods. Like something really like difficult happened 18 months ago. I'll be like, oh, what's wrong with me? And it'll be like, well, 18, it just always like
interesting
hits me 18 months later. So that's interesting time for you.
Yeah.
But to sort of change the narrative of yourself. I mean, I have ADHD and that's become a bit of my identity. And lately I have been questioning that and trying to be like, hey, well, you know, even when you weren't diagnosed, you still like got a lot done. And are you using it as a crutch in some ways? And like, I think that's, you know, changing. Sometimes you get diagnosed with something or you get told something and it's a relief. Because you're like, oh, good, there's a reason I am this way. But then sometimes it can become the excuse, you know, and like, that's a really interesting turn. So curious.
Yeah.
Curious.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
You can edit this however you want to.
Okay.
But I've noticed like, and I'm, I write about food and I'm in the food world, and I've just like noticed that there's a lot of shifts happening, and like the vegan product thing has definitely come up. I don't know, like, veganism, I don't know where that works for everybody. It doesn't work for me for various reasons. But I've also noticed a big shift and a big conversation around sobriety and being like sober curious or not. And I've cut like basically my birthday last year because I had to have surgery. So like last year I was like, I'm just gonna stop drinking. And I just did. And it was great. And I kind of for the most part don't really drink anymore, except for if I really, really want to. Or if I'm just like, there's like a really good wine, I'm not gonna say no to that. But do you see this shift happening? And do you think this has something to do with the sort of spiritual landscape or what's happening with us as a collective?
I do, actually. I really do. My husband and I did a whole year of not drinking last year, like no alcohol at all for a year. We're just like, let's just completely not. Before that, I would go months, sometimes 7, 8 months without drinking. Like, it wasn't a big thing for me. But we were curious about like health and energy with absolutely no alcohol. So it was a really interesting experience. We gained so much from it. During that understanding and tapping into my guides about different things like that, because that question was coming up for me before, I saw how much, or they kind of explained how much alcohol is very much a depressant energy. And so with it being a depressant, it lowers your frequency. So for the time in which you're drinking, it lowers your vibrational rate, which is fine. You can totally do it. The spirit wasn't like do or don't, but they're just like, it lowers your frequency. So depending on how much you drink, there's an after effect of having a low frequency. Now, if you're someone who's already vibing higher, being pushed down into that lower frequency might cause more disharmony in your body versus if you're vibrating lower, then it's not that big of a shift. Now, that doesn't mean really amazing people who are fine with drinking and have no repercussions. It doesn't mean they're low vibe. Again, generalized statement. But all to say is that a lot of people, this collective shift moving from it is because there's like a collective desire for higher frequency, and alcohol doesn't facilitate higher frequency long term.
Yeah. And I can totally see that with people and like kind of see what's happening. It sort of feels like everyone's like, well, hold on. And I kind of looking back, I'm 36, and sort of my formative years were around like the early 2000s, like 2000, and I started drinking quite young and going to bars quite young and doing all that. It's just shots. Like I drank a lot when I was in my 20s, like early 20s for sure. And I sort of am like, was I kind of sold a lie about this? Like, because I feel pretty good now, and I haven't felt good in a while, and it's like, I feel much more like present and engaged in my life, and really like more conscious of what I'm doing, to a point, and I don't want to be like, I'm so great. It's like,
no, I understand.
it's not that. But I kind of am like, wow, is this just sort of some like kind of lie we've told ourselves in some way, that this is like the best way to have a good time, and that sort of thing. So yeah.
And it's true. And there's, it's been so entwined with celebration and stuff like that. But what my husband and I really learned in that year of just absolutely not drinking is how much fun we can still have in celebration with a non-alcoholic beverage of sorts, right? Like, and then how much that energy of the celebration actually sticks with us in the days after, because it's not having to battle through this low frequency dip when your body's trying to recover from the toxin, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So you can actually carry the energy from whatever events further, but it has to be this conscious choice of acknowledging your feelings in any situation, and like, so you don't fall into that peer pressure of, oh, I'll just have a glass of wine, this will make it all better. Right?
Yeah. And just acknowledging your feelings. I think like, I wouldn't say I was ever like, oh yeah, when I was younger, I partied, but then, my 30s, I've been pretty chill.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely know people who drink. I also worked in the restaurant business, so my idea was chill, maybe very different from what other
Right.
people's idea of what chill is.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely had to kind of, like realize the things that I perhaps was covering up, or, like recognize the role alcohol does,
Yeah.
play in their life. I also think it's interesting that this movement is also coinciding with, and I don't know how much you're into this world or know about this world, but like the kind of psychedelic movement.
Totally. I was going to bring it up too. Yeah.
Okay,
It's neat. It is neat how it's shifting from low frequency things into higher frequency things.
yeah.
And now I do want to say there are some mediums that can have a couple drinks and still tune in and still feel fine. So like
Yeah.
I'm giving a very generalized statement, but the desire for people to step into more psychedelic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I really like how a lot of it's being presented in a spiritual sense. Get to know yourself better. Find what's inside you in this experience versus let's have a wild party, do a whole bunch of mushrooms and trip out the whole time. Right?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
different invitation.
Totally. And I remember, I went to a friend's house and they were all doing like, I was like, oh, Friday night was to hang out, and they were all doing like a bunch of ketamine. I was like, oh, I didn't know we were doing this. And I remember just kind of sitting there being like, all of you guys are just having your own experiences together,
Mm-hmm.
not actually connecting on any
Mm-hmm.
level, kind of thing, as actual people. Like it just felt like they were all just having these individual experiences in the room together, which has a time and place. But I'm more for like, how do we connect more? How do we become more, you know,
Mm-hmm.
together? And so I find like, and I've never done ketamine, so I have no idea what that really. They may be having a totally different experience than what I think
Mm-hmm.
they're having. But yeah, it's sort of it's like it's an interesting how people do use substances to kind of either connect or disconnect. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like the little bit of psychedelics I've done, it feels very connective.
Mm-hmm.
That's like I think there is something there going on in the collective in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally think so. And it's interesting. And I see this awakening in the collective in a lot of different ways. So again, if we bring it back to what we were talking about in the beginning with like you having that thought of, I'm going to die one day, like that's often what is brought into certain psychedelic experiences is they have an ego death, a lot of people say, or a questioning about death, or they're confronted with the idea of dying. And when they confront that and then choose to make the most of it, there's like a sense of liberation
Yeah.
that comes from it. And so that's why I love that it came up for you, because to me, that really speaks of this new phase of liberating yourself from things that have been holding you back.
Yeah. And I would say that if anybody has that like moment of death, like don't let it cripple you if you can,
Mm-hmm.
because it is like quite freeing actually,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's not, I mean, yeah, I'm still like, okay, all right, then, well, that's, it is a terrifying thought, but it can be, or it can just be like kind of a like, oh, okay, well, that's the truth. So what am I going to do today? That's going to make this kind of moment interesting or important to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe the legacy of that. And it's not the first time I've had one of these moments, but it's been a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I'm hoping this energy will carry me forward a little bit, where it's like, this is the only time you're going to be in this way on this planet. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Amazing. So, to bring this kind of to a close,
Yeah.
if people are wanting to check out some of your content, food, pictures, promos, things, because your social media is so colorful, like your images are just the coolest. I was looking at the latest one the other day. I was like, man, she just knows how to make things so inviting looking. It was that whole spread with the pink background and all the food, like picnicky and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, where can people find you?
So probably the best place to find me is on my Instagram, which is Abby, ABBY. Abby likes to eat.
Okay.
I am like it's kind of not really a business. I've been really bad at marketing my business part of it, but so I also will be launching Moose Boosh. So if you follow me there, I'll let you know. And that's
Oh,
a
nice.
creative, which is kind of going to be my proper business studio name. After 10 years of doing this, I'm finally getting it. So I'll be doing that in the next coming weeks. So that's a great place to find me. I also have a blog that I've kind of let go, but I'm dreaming of getting back in. And I feel like that's part of what I'll be doing in the future. Called Small Batch Vancouver. I hope so. I mean, I'm like, should I do this?
Totally. I think so. And the fact that you are talking about it and now it's on the podcast and in people's ears, then it means it must be. So
yeah. So that's smallbatchvancouver.com. I mean, I've never let it go. It was just more of a time consuming thing.
Yeah.
But also I'm like, you know, it's sometimes you let things go because it's not the right time, you know? And I think like that wasn't totally the right time for me to do that. So I feel like that time is coming. So
absolutely.
Anyway, so yeah, that's another thing. Smallbatchvancouver.com or smallbatchman on Instagram. So that should be coming up. So
amazing. All right. Well, thank you for just jumping on the podcast to have this chat. I think it's just so lovely. And thank you to all of you who are listening. Hopefully this helps to inspire some liberation in your life. So thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Abby. And we'll see you all later.